I couldn't believe it when I saw him again. It had been years, years of silence. I had built a life, a career, far from the man who once controlled my every move, who once made me feel like nothing more than a pawn in his game. But there he was, standing in front of me, looking as confident and composed as ever. James, my stepfather, the man who had shattered everything I once knew. I stood frozen for a moment in the crowded cafe, my heart pounding in my chest. I thought I had moved on from him. I thought I had buried the pain he caused me so deep that nothing could ever bring it back to the surface. But there he was, his eyes scanning the room, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing inside me. I could feel the memories flooding back, the hurt, the confusion, the years of silence. I had once been his daughter. I had once trusted him. But what he did to me, what he made me endure, it could never be undone. I had built walls around myself after everything that happened. I had protected myself, rebuilt my life, and buried the past. But seeing him here now, in front of me, I knew that the walls I had built were about to come crashing down. I wasn't sure how he would react. He had always been so calculating, so manipulative. I couldn't help but wonder if he recognized me, if he remembered the things he had done to me. Did he think I had forgotten? Did he think he could get away with it? But this time, I wasn't the same person. I wasn't that scared, confused girl anymore. I was stronger, I was smarter, and I was ready. I took a deep breath and walked toward him. My heels clicked loudly against the tile floor, cutting through the noise of the cafe. He looked up just as I reached the table, his eyes flicking over me for a brief moment before his face softened into that fake smile I had come to despise. "Emily," he said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. "It's been a long time." I didn't sit down. I didn't let him get comfortable. I wasn't here for pleasantries. I was here for something much more important. "You didn't think I'd find out, did you?" I asked, my voice sharp. His expression faltered for a second. That moment of hesitation was enough. It told me everything I needed to know. He was nervous. He didn't expect me to confront him. He thought I had forgotten. But I hadn't. I would never forget. "Find out about what?" he asked, trying to act casual, but there was a tremor in his voice. "About the lies, the manipulation, the things you did," I said, my words slow, deliberate. "The things you did to me, to our family." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything right away. I could see him trying to process what I was saying, trying to figure out how to spin it, how to make me believe it was all just a misunderstanding. I wasn't buying it anymore. Not this time. Not after everything. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I continued, leaning in closer. "The way you manipulated my mother, the way you made me feel like I was crazy, like I was the one who was wrong. The way you took advantage of our family and destroyed everything for your own benefit." His face twisted for a moment, anger flashing in his eyes. But he quickly masked it, returning to that cold, calculating expression. "Emily, that's a long time ago," he said, his voice quieter now. "We've both moved on. There's no need to dig up the past. I'm not that person anymore." I almost laughed at how easy it was for him to say those words, as if everything could be forgotten, as if all the damage he had done could be erased with a few well-placed words. "No, James," I said, my voice steady. "You don't get to pretend like nothing happened. You don't get to erase the years of hurt, the years of manipulation, just because it's convenient for you." I watched him carefully, studying his every move. He was still trying to control the situation, to turn the tables, to make me feel like I was the one who was overreacting. "You think you can just apologize and make it all go away?" I asked, my eyes narrowing. "It doesn't work like that. You're not going to get away with it this time." James shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze darting around the cafe as if he were looking for an escape. But I wasn't going to let him go. "Not this time. I'm not here for an apology," I said, my voice low, but firm. "I'm here to make sure you pay for what you did, and I'm going to make sure you don't get away with it." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "You don't get to control me anymore. You don't get to control anyone." I turned to walk away, leaving him there, still sitting in the booth, staring after me. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of everything I had gone through starting to lift. I was no longer the girl who had let him dictate my life. I was free now, and I was going to make sure he was held accountable for everything he had done. The next few days were a blur of emotions and strategies. After confronting James in the cafe, I knew I had to act quickly. He hadn't expected me to come for him, not like this. The look in his eyes when I left, it wasn't fear, but it was close. He was caught off guard, and I could see it. But that was just the beginning. It wasn't enough to confront him once. I needed to take him down, piece by piece, in a way he would never see coming. I wasn't the naive, vulnerable girl I had once been. The girl who had let him manipulate her, who had believed his lies, who had been too scared to fight back. Now, I was a woman who had learned how to play the game. And if there was one thing I knew about James, it was that he was a master at it. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could. I reached out to people who knew him, people who had been burned by him in the past. There were old friends of my mother who had witnessed his behavior, former employees who had been pushed out of his life, and even old family members who had distanced themselves from him. They all had stories, pieces of the puzzle that would finally expose him for who he really was. But I wasn't just collecting stories. I was collecting the pieces of his empire, the financial records, the hidden investments, the accounts he had used to manipulate his way through life. James had always been the one pulling the strings, but now it was my turn to do the same. One evening, I sat at my desk in my apartment, surrounded by piles of papers and files. I was going through bank statements, old contracts, and email chains that I had uncovered. Everything he had tried to hide was out in the open, and I could feel the weight of it in my hands. He had used his wealth, his charm, and his position to destroy people's lives, my life included, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. The phone rang, breaking my concentration. I glanced at the caller ID. It was Ryan, my childhood friend, the one person who had always been there for me, even when I couldn't see past the fog of the past. "Hey," I answered, my voice steady. "Are you okay?" Ryan's voice was soft, but I could hear the concern in it. He knew what I was going through, and I could tell he didn't like what I was doing. "You've been really quiet. What's going on?" I let out a breath, trying to keep myself composed. "I'm fine," I said. I'm making sure everything is in place. I'm going after him." "Emily," he said, his tone urgent. "This isn't just about you anymore. You're digging into things that go way beyond James. You need to be careful. He's dangerous. You don't know what he's capable of." I didn't need to hear this. I had already thought about the risks, but I couldn't back down now. Not after everything. "I'm fine," I said again, this time with more force. "I'm not going to stop until he pays for what he did." There was a pause on the other end. I knew Ryan was still worried, but I couldn't let him talk me out of this. I couldn't let anyone talk me out of it. Finally, Ryan sighed. "I'm not going to stop you. I just want you to be careful. If you need help, you know where to find me." "Thanks," I said softly. "I will." The conversation ended, but Ryan's warning stayed with me. I knew he was right. I was playing with fire, but I didn't care anymore. James had burned me for too long. I was done running. It was time to take control. The next morning, I got a call that made my blood run cold. It was an anonymous tip-off, and the voice on the other end was unrecognizable. But the message was clear. James is making deals behind the scenes. He's trying to fix this, to buy his way out. I didn't need to be told twice. I knew exactly what I had to do. The tipster mentioned a meeting James was having with a powerful investor in a hotel downtown. It was the perfect opportunity to catch him, to force him into a corner where he would have no choice but to confront the truth. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I made sure all the evidence was in place, the documents, the photos, the recordings. I was going to confront him again, but this time, there would be no escape. The meeting was set for the evening. As the hours ticked down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Was he expecting me? Was he trying to manipulate the situation again? I had to stay one step ahead, and I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. By the time I arrived at the hotel, the sun had begun to set. I watched as James entered the lobby with his usual air of arrogance, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit him. He was meeting with the investor, a man who had once been a key ally, but I knew that would change after tonight. I waited in the shadows, watching as James made his way to the meeting room. I could feel the tension building in my chest. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for. As he entered the room, I moved quickly, stepping into the hallway that led to the conference room. I had to act now, before he could twist the situation in his favor, before he could play his cards again. I took a deep breath, my hand on the door handle. "This is it, Emily," I thought. No turning back now. I pushed the door open, and James looked up in surprise. His eyes narrowed when he saw me standing there, but I wasn't going to give him the chance to regain control. I stepped into the room, slamming the file down on the table in front of him. "James," I said, my voice calm but filled with fire. "It's time to face the consequences." It's funny how one moment, one single decision, can change everything. I hadn't even realized how much power I had until the moment I handed James the file. The file that would ruin him. The file that contained everything he had worked so hard to hide. His face, as he flicked through it, told me everything I needed to know. He was terrified. But even as I stood there, watching him squirm, something inside me told me that it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough just to confront him and show him his lies. I had to do more. I had to make sure that he understood the full weight of everything he had done, to me, to my family, to anyone who crossed his path. And the only way to do that was to take everything from him. Not just his reputation, but his power, his control, everything. I didn't take my eyes off of him as I spoke. You have no idea, do you? How far you've gone to destroy lives, to break people down, to manipulate and control them. But you know what, James? The game is over now. You've lost. He blinked rapidly, trying to maintain some semblance of composure, but it was clear that I had caught him off guard. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced with a panic I had never seen before. I don't know what you think you're doing, Emily, he said, his voice shaking slightly. You can't just walk in here and expect to take everything from me. You don't understand what you're dealing with. I cut him off, not allowing him to finish. I understand more than you think, I said coldly, and you're not in control anymore. You never were. You just made everyone believe you were, and I let you, but not anymore. His eyes flicked toward the door as if considering making a run for it. But where could he go? The doors were locked. The security cameras were on. The moment he stepped into the light, the world would see him for who he truly was, a fraud, a manipulator, a criminal. I was ready for this. I had been preparing for this day for years, even though I hadn't known it back then. I had kept my distance, built my career, rebuilt my life. But every step I took, I knew this moment was coming. I had to make sure that I was stronger than him. I couldn't let him intimidate me anymore. Let me make something clear, James, I said, walking slowly around the table toward him. Everything you've done, every lie, every manipulation, it's all coming to light. You can't hide from the truth. Not anymore. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw fear in his eyes. It was strange. I had spent so much of my life fearing him, but now it was him who was afraid. The roles had reversed, and I was the one in control. But I wasn't done yet. I still had one more card to play. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, neatly folded envelope. James watched me closely, his eyes narrowing. I could see him trying to read me, trying to figure out what I was going to do next. You're still thinking you can get out of this, aren't you? I said as I placed the envelope in front of him. That's your mistake. You think you can buy your way out of this. You think you can use your connections, your money, your charm to fix everything. But it's over. And this. I paused, letting the weight of the silence hang between us. This is the end of the line for you. James didn't touch the envelope right away. He just stared at it, his mind working to come up with a way to turn the situation in his favor. But there was nothing he could do now. Everything he had done to protect himself, to keep me from ever getting this far, had failed. Finally, he reached for the envelope, his fingers trembling. He opened it slowly, the paper inside making a soft rustling sound as he read it. His expression shifted from confusion to shock, and then, finally, to fury. You think this is going to destroy me, he spat, slamming the envelope back onto the table. This is nothing. You don't know who I am, what I've done. You think a few papers are going to bring me down? I remained calm, my eyes locked on his. No, James, this isn't just about papers. It's about people. People who you've hurt, people who you've manipulated. And I've got the truth now. The truth that you can't hide from anymore. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You don't know what you're dealing with. His voice was low, but there was a raw, desperate edge to it now. I will destroy you if you try to bring me down. You don't have the power, Emily. You never did. I stood my ground. That's where you're wrong. I do have the power now. The only thing you have left is your fear, and that's not going to save you. He took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists, but I didn't flinch. I knew what he was capable of, and I had prepared for it. I was no longer the scared girl who had let him control her. I was stronger now. I had the truth, and with it, I had everything I needed to take him down. He stopped just short of me, his face inches away, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes, something raw, something desperate. It was almost as if he was waiting for me to back down, to give him an out. But I wasn't going to. Not this time. I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping to a whisper. You've lost, James, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. I turned and walked toward the door, leaving him standing there, paralyzed by the weight of his own fear. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had one. I hadn't planned for this. But then again, James had always been unpredictable. After the confrontation, I thought it would be a matter of time before he cracked. before his empire of lies crumbled entirely. But he didn't go down as easily as I'd expected. No, he was going to fight back, and in his mind, he still thought he could win. The days following our encounter were filled with a silence I wasn't prepared for. I kept my distance, letting him stew in his own mess, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I had handed him the truth, the evidence he couldn't deny, and yet, he wasn't crumbling. I had expected him to come crawling, maybe even beg for mercy, but instead, he'd gone on the offensive. I didn't need to ask. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to silence me. He was trying to discredit everything I had said, everything I had fought for. The phone rang late one night, a number I didn't recognize flashing across the screen. I hesitated before picking up. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to push everything aside, but another part, the part that had taken control, knew I couldn't back down now. "Emily, this is Lisa," a voice on the other end of the line said. "I need to talk to you about James." Lisa. The name alone made my blood run cold. She had been one of James' associates, someone who had worked closely with him on various shady deals. I had never trusted her, but I hadn't expected her to call me either. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not here to make threats," she said, her tone almost apologetic. I think you should know that James is going to make your life hell if you keep pushing this. He's already talking to his lawyers, and he's trying to get the media on his side. He's pulling strings, Emily. You don't want to get caught in the middle of this. It's bigger than you think." I clenched my fists, irritation bubbling up. I wasn't surprised, of course. James had always been able to manipulate the system, to control everything in his path. But that didn't mean I was going to roll over now. "I'm not backing down," I said, my voice hard. "If he thinks he can intimidate me, he's wrong. This time, I have the truth, and that's all that matters." Lisa was quiet for a moment, as if weighing her words carefully. "I don't want to get involved, but just know that he's not going to let this go. He's a lot more dangerous than you think." I paused, considering her words. But ultimately, I knew she was just trying to scare me, trying to make me second-guess myself. I wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. "Thanks for the warning," I said, my voice clipped. "But I can handle it." I hung up the phone, my heart racing. There it was, the moment I had been dreading, the moment when I realized that this wasn't just about confronting James. This was about fighting him, for my life, for my future, for everything I had built after all these years. I wasn't scared of him anymore. I was done being afraid. The next few days were a blur of planning and preparation. I couldn't afford to be careless. If I was going to take James down, I had to stay ahead of him, anticipate his every move. So, I did what I knew best. I went to work. I started digging into his past, pulling at strings I had long ignored. I looked through the papers again, the documents I had gathered, and something caught my eye, a name I didn't recognize, a figure connected to one of his older business deals. It didn't make sense at first, but the more I looked, the more the pieces started to fall into place. It was a connection to a shady international deal, one that James had been involved in years ago. I had never even thought to look into it before, but now it felt like the missing link, the key to everything. I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. I called Ryan, knowing I could trust him more than anyone else. He had always been my rock, the one person who had been there for me no matter what. I knew he would understand the weight of what was happening. "I think I found something," I said, my voice low. "Something big. James has a connection to some shady international dealings. I'm not sure what it means yet, but it's the missing piece." Ryan's voice was steady, but I could tell he was concerned. "Are you sure you want to go after this? This is getting deeper than I thought. If James is involved in something like that, we might be stepping into something much bigger." "I don't have a choice, Ryan," I said, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "I can't just let him walk away from everything he's done. He has to pay." "I'm not backing down now." Ryan sighed. "Okay, I'll help you. But we need to be careful. This is bigger than both of us." "Agreed," I said, my voice firm. "But we'll do it my way. No backing down." The next few days felt like a countdown, the tension growing with every passing minute. James was getting more desperate, trying everything he could to stop the truth from coming out. His lawyers were working overtime, trying to discredit me, trying to make me look like the one in the wrong. But I wasn't going to let him turn the tables. I wasn't scared anymore. I had the upper hand now, and no matter how far James tried to push, he was never going to get away with it again. The deeper I dug, the more I realized how dangerously close I was to the edge. What had started as a personal vendetta had evolved into something much larger than I had anticipated. Each piece of evidence, every connection to his shady dealings, only led to darker corners of James' world that I wasn't prepared for. I had been playing a game I thought I knew, but the more I uncovered, the more I saw how ruthless and far-reaching his influence was. He wasn't just some businessman who had crossed the line once. No, he was tangled in a web of corruption that spanned countries and industries. The man I had once called my stepfather was a monster, a puppet master pulling the strings of a dangerous, complex operation. It wasn't just the financial crimes anymore. It was everything. The people he had ruined, the lives he had destroyed, the people who had been silenced, forgotten, all the things he had done to protect himself, to protect his empire. And now, it was my turn to bring it all to light. But I wasn't naive. I knew that exposing him would put me in danger. If James thought he could scare me into backing down, he was wrong. I had already lost so much to him. What more could he take? It was time for the final push. The moment of reckoning was near, and I wasn't going to wait for him to make the first move. I had to strike before he could silence me, before he could manipulate the situation like he always had. I met with Ryan again, and this time, I had more than just the evidence I'd gathered. I had a plan, a dangerous one, but necessary. I don't think we can just expose him in court, I said, my voice tight. It's too risky. The way he's been handling everything, he'll find a way to spin it in his favor, like he always does. Ryan frowned, clearly uneasy. Then what are you thinking? We need to hit him where it hurts, I said. We're going to leak everything. We'll expose him in the press, through media outlets, through journalists who have been waiting for a story like this. But we do it strategically. We don't just give them the documents. We give them the story, the narrative, the full scope of who he is. Once it's out, there's no going back. Ryan looked at me, his brow furrowed. You're talking about more than just the legal side of things. You want to destroy him. You're not just exposing his crimes. You're burying him. Exactly, I said, my voice unwavering. I'm not just looking for justice anymore. I want him to lose everything. I want him to understand that no one is untouchable. Not anymore. Ryan didn't say anything at first. I could tell he was processing everything I'd said. Finally, he nodded slowly. All right. If we're doing this, we're going all in. No turning back. None, I replied. This is the only way he'll understand that I'm done being controlled. The plan was set. We had everything ready. The contacts, the journalists, the story, the evidence. It wasn't just a matter of handing over documents. It was about painting a picture of who James truly was, to make sure that even his supporters couldn't ignore the truth. I knew he had connections, but this wasn't about who he knew. This was about exposing the real man behind the facade. We chose the timing carefully. The moment we hit send on those emails, the media would explode. The truth would be out, and James' carefully constructed world would crumble. I knew it would change everything, but I was prepared. I had no other choice. The moment came, and with a deep breath, I pressed send. For the first few hours, nothing happened. I didn't know what I expected. I had prepared myself for the silence, the waiting. But then the first message came through. The story was live. The media had picked it up, and the articles began to flood the internet. There was no turning back now. James' name was everywhere. The truth about his financial schemes, his lies, his manipulation, and the connections to criminal organizations was now public knowledge. The storm had begun. It didn't take long for the backlash to start. People who had once trusted him began to question everything. Sponsors pulled out. His business partners distanced themselves. The once invincible empire he had built started to crack and collapse under the weight of the truth. He was no longer untouchable. The next few days were a blur of calls and messages. The media wouldn't stop. James' lawyers tried to fight back, but it was too late. The public had already made their judgment. His reputation, the one he had spent his life crafting, was gone in an instant. He was exposed, just like I said he would be. I met with Ryan again, and the weight of it all hit me. I had done it. I had exposed him for the monster he was. But I hadn't expected the sense of emptiness that followed. Is it over now? Ryan asked, his voice filled with quiet awe. I looked at him, trying to gather my thoughts. I had spent so long planning this moment, but now that it had arrived, I didn't feel the triumph I had expected. No, I said softly. This is just the beginning. The storm had broken. There was no going back now. The articles were everywhere. The headlines screamed his name in shame. James, my stepfather, the man who had so carefully curated his image as a successful businessman, a man of power and influence, was being torn apart. His reputation was in tatters, and it felt oddly hollow to watch it unfold. I had spent so much time planning this, so much time preparing for this moment. But now that it had arrived, It wasn't the victory I had imagined. The media did its work, unveiling every dark corner of his empire. The evidence I had sent out, the financial fraud, the corruption, the manipulation, all of it was laid bare for the world to see. People who once admired him now turned their backs, and with every new headline, I felt his grip on my life loosen just a little more. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I had spent years building myself up after everything that happened with him. I had worked hard to make sure I was no longer that scared, dependent girl. I was strong now, independent, successful in my own right. But as the world learned the truth about James, I couldn't help but wonder if this would ever truly feel like justice. And then the phone call came, the last one I ever expected. It was from my mother. "Emily, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. I can't believe this. I never thought it would come to this. James, he's not the man I thought he was. But I didn't know. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I had spent years resenting her for turning a blind eye to everything James had done to me. For years, I had blamed her, and yet now, here she was, asking for a conversation, asking for forgiveness. "You didn't know?" I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You really didn't know?" There was a long pause before she spoke again. I wanted to believe in him. I wanted to believe that he was just misunderstood, that maybe it was me. But now, seeing everything in the news, it's like the truth is hitting me all at once. And I'm sorry, Emily. I don't know how to fix this. I closed my eyes, feeling the anger and betrayal I had buried for so long rise to the surface. For years, I had blamed myself for what happened, for letting James control me. But my mother, the one person who should have protected me, had been just as blinded as I had been. And now, it was all coming out. "You didn't protect me, Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You didn't protect me when I needed it the most." She sobbed on the other end of the line. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say to make it right." I felt a pang of sadness, but also a deep, gnawing frustration. After all these years, was this all we were going to get? A hollow apology from a mother who had failed me when I needed her the most? "I don't need you to say anything," I said, my voice hardening. "I just need you to stay out of it. I'm done with him, and I'm done with the past." I hung up the phone, the silence in my apartment swallowing me whole. I had exposed James, yes. But had I exposed myself too? Was I now the one left with the wreckage of a broken family? I wasn't sure anymore. Later that evening, I received an unexpected message from a journalist I had worked with to help expose James. It was a brief message, but it was enough to make my heart race. "James has gone missing. No one knows where he is. The police are involved." I froze. I had expected him to fight back, to try and turn the tables in his favor, but this was different. James wasn't the type to just disappear. He was a man who thrived on control, and now, he was gone. The weight of it all pressed down on me. I had won, in a sense. His empire had crumbled, his lies had been exposed, and his career was over. But now, with him gone, I was left to pick up the pieces. My mind raced as I thought of all the dark places James could be hiding. What if he was planning his next move? What if he wasn't done yet? A sense of unease settled in my stomach. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. I picked up my phone, dialing Ryan's number. He picked up almost immediately, as if he had been waiting for my call. "Emily, what's going on? What's happening with James?" His voice was calm, but I could hear the concern. "He's gone," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "He's disappeared. No one knows where he is, and I'm not sure if this is over. I don't know what he's planning." Ryan was silent for a moment. "We'll find him," he said, his voice firm. "But you need to stay focused. You've already done the hard part. You've taken him down. You've exposed him. You need to trust that this is the end." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something inside me told me that James wasn't finished. And until I knew where he was, I wouldn't be able to rest. "I'm not stopping until I know he can't hurt anyone else," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. The truth was out there, and James had been exposed. But even as I stood on the edge of my victory, I knew that the final act was still unfolding. The reckoning wasn't over yet. By morning, everything would be different. And I wasn't sure what would come next, but I was ready to face whatever it was.